This is Ask Joe number 196, the Lassie edition. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Ask Joe. My name's Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com, and that intro is a little example of how silly and kind of absurd this podcast can be, but also why you should make every effort to attend these things when I do them live. I do them every Tuesday, most every Tuesday. I took the last few off, I was on vacation, but most Tuesdays, I am here at 1 p.m. Central Time, streaming this whole thing live. So we put together the intro together, and then I stream this and get questions from the people in the live chat as well. It's a lot of fun. So work your lunch break around that, or if you got a day off on Tuesday and you want to come hang out, please do, because sometimes I do things like I'm about to whistle a melody and the first person to guess will win a copy of one of my courses, Understanding EQ. So big congratulations to Larry Plays Guitar. I'm going to go ahead and guess that Plays Guitar is not his last name, but he did win a copy of Understanding EQ or another product of his choice because he guessed that was the theme song from Lassie. And I'm getting ridiculed as apparently being old for knowing that was from Lassie and having watched Lassie. I didn't think I was old. Got a bunch of young farts in here. They're all calling me an old fart. And apparently someone's son heard me whistle it and is now whistling the Lassie theme song. So my work here is done. Okay, so what I want to talk about today, there were a couple of, I was actually coming into this episode kind of with a blank, not sure what I wanted to talk about. And by the way, we should be on a streak now of weekly episodes. We'll kind of get back into the swing of things. Took a few weeks off, had some vacation. We just stuck around Nashville and it was really fun. But I'm back and I've got the foreseeable next couple months of Tuesdays blocked out. So we'll be doing this for real. Okay, so I asked the people in the live chat what they wanted to hear me talk about today. And there was one that grabbed my attention that I want to talk about quickly. So this is from Sam. And Sam says he wants to hear me talk about applying for studio work. So I'm going to assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but I'm going to assume you're talking about applying for a job at a studio. And so I want to address this from a different way of finding work as an audio person, audio engineer, recording engineer, whatever you want to call it. I don't talk about this a lot, and I probably should because not everyone who's a Home Studio Corner fan is trying to find paid work, but I imagine most of us, of you, would accept some paid work if it came along and wouldn't mind finding ways to make a few extra bucks as a studio or in a studio or something like that. So the thing I would say is, and the question was applying for studio work, and I would throw this out there. I would say if your main game strategy is to get a job at a studio, it could happen. It's certainly possible, but I don't think it's likely. That's not anything against you. I don't know your skill as an engineer, and there are still studios that do still hire people, but they are becoming less and less. As someone who lives in Nashville, I see pretty regularly engineers who just got let go from a studio, or studios that are shutting down. A lot more home studios, a lot less, proper recording studios. They're still there. There's still an industry for it. It's just a smaller, different industry, right? And that's no surprise. That seems like it's a pretty normal, everybody kind of gets that and knows that. But I still run into people all the time who want to go, their sole purpose, well, not their sole purpose, but their sole strategy for making a living as an engineer is to find a job at a studio. And while that may happen, again, it could happen. One of our members at Dueling Mixes, actually, Steve Dandria, he's an admin on our forum, our member forum, because he's just awesome and was so helpful in the forum. We asked him to administrate it, and kind of him and another guy, Rob Morgan. And when we were at NAMM, Graham and I went to a studio where he actually just walked in and essentially, I can't remember the exact story, but he basically found a job for himself. He was in the right place at the right time. Somebody had just left and he got a job. This is out in California. So it certainly is possible. I would say the chances of you getting a job, just like, I don't think So I'm going to talk about this in two parts. First, getting a job in a studio, and second, what I think you should do instead. So the first thing, if you're going to get a job, it's just like any other job in any other industry. Sending out resumes could work, occasionally works, but it's sending out a resume is the equivalent of sending out spam, right? If you're just sending out, you find every studio you can and you send them a boilerplate resume, they have no reason, only in the most perfect of circumstances will they even give you any thought, right? They're going to hire someone they know, someone that's worked there, a friend of a friend, all those types of things. Most jobs, at least in my experience, tend to happen from knowing someone, having a connection. So the biggest thing I think you can do is to be about the business of knowing a lot of people and rubbing shoulders with the right people, not in a spammy, hey, can you get me a job sort of way, but in a real, human way, develop real relationships with these people. And then once you have those relationships, occasionally some things will happen. So I would think even whether you're getting a job at a studio or at a big, bank or just some sort of marketing agency, sending a resume is most likely not going to get you anywhere, right? Okay. Second thing is, if you're banking on someone else hiring you and giving you a quote unquote job, and that's the only way you're going to make money as an engineer, you're going to miss out on so many cool opportunities. I say this all the time. If you are doing audio and you have any inkling of a desire to make money with it, then you need to think like an entrepreneur. You need to start your own business and go into business for yourself. Doesn't mean you need to buy a big building and put a studio in it. It just means you're a freelance engineer. Be an entrepreneur. Don't sit around and hope that someone else opens the door and gives you permission to do this. You got to give yourself permission. You got to go get it. For example, I've been doing this YouTube thing, right? Since 2009. What was that, 8 years? It's a long time, especially in the internet world. I didn't wait for someone to say, Joe, I give you permission to have a YouTube channel. I just did it. And if you go back, if you find my early videos, they're garbage, right? They weren't good. I wasn't good at this. I didn't know very much about doing YouTube videos, much less anything else. And over the years, I learned and I adjusted and I changed and I just kept doing things and doing things and doing it and doing it. And eventually, I got better at it and started to build an audience and a following. And I've gotten client work through that. I've sold my courses through that. I've done lots of things. I've built a business essentially through YouTube. So I'm not saying you need to build a YouTube channel to get a job in the studio, but I am saying you need to give yourself permission to start doing the work and to go into business for yourself. Even if you end up getting a job at a studio, if I'm a studio, proper, facility, and I see someone who's been out there getting gigs and doing work in his facility versus a kid who just graduated school and sent me a resume, I'm going to hire the guy who did it himself 99 times out of 100. So if you're thinking, I want a job at a studio, you need to start treating yourself like a business now, and then maybe you'll get an opportunity at a studio down the road. I think I cannot stress that enough. I think as much as you watch my videos and other people's videos and do courses and learn about audio, I think you should spend as much time learning about business and marketing, because that's really where the work, someone who is less talented than you is getting more work than you because they know how to get themselves out there and market themselves better. So you need to be good at what you do, but you also need to be good at marketing what you do. And I think that's the big thing that so many creatives are bad at. Musicians are bad at promoting themselves and their own music. They're bad at coming up with creative ways to create new music. They want to put music on iTunes and think it's just going to go viral, and that just doesn't really happen all that much. You got to be creative. We're creative when it comes to making the music and working on mixes and recording, but we're not that creative when it comes to promotion and getting our stuff out there. You may not think of me as a recording artist, right? You probably think of me as a YouTube person, but essentially I've the goal from the very beginning was to be a rock star, right? To make a living in music. And for me, that did not go the direction I thought it would go. It ended up going through creating a website and helping other people record music, and that's how I'm making a living through my music. It's not what I thought it would be. I love it. I never would have dreamed this for myself, but I really enjoy it, and it's really fulfilling, and I get to make music, and people still enjoy and buy my music and all that stuff. And it opens doors to, the getting to play on the radio a few months back. That was because of Home Studio Corner, which was started because of me wanting to do music. So just do good work, become a good marketer, and I think doors will open for you almost magically. Boom. The chat is going nuts. A lot of cool people are here. Gary Fox is here. Marco's here. As always, Johnny Lipsham's here. I'm trying to catch up on the conversation there, but I just can't because you're all talking too fast. But I'm glad you're here. It looks like you're answering each other's questions, and looks like you're maybe agreeing with me, which I really encourage. Stroke the ego, please. All right, so I'm going to jump into the questions the rest of this episode, and I've got 25 minutes before I got to go somewhere. So these next 25 minutes are for you, my dear friend. I want to help you. I want to answer your questions. I want to do whatever I can. So ask me questions, be specific, and I'll try to give you as specific answers as I can, because I really do want you to get better. I want you to interact with me and wind up better because of it. Whether it's your mixes are better, or you have a better approach to things, or you go out and start your own business because I said it and it finally tweaked in your head. I don't know. Who knows? But welcome to everybody on the live chat. As always, if you want to know when these are happening, you can subscribe to my calendar, which is at homestudiocorner.com/calendar. You can actually subscribe on your phone and your computer, and so it'll show up. You'll see when Ask Joe is happening. The link to the broadcast and everything will be there. So you'll actually get a notification when it starts as well, which is kind of cool. You may have noticed if you were subscribed the last 2 weeks, there was a little thing that said no Ask Joe today, because I was gone. But now I'm back, and I've missed you, and I've missed doing this. So thank you for being here and giving me a reason to do this. All right, there was at least one question, 2 questions on Facebook that I'm going to grab, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my time in the live chat. So think of questions, post them, and I will get to them. And we're going to have some fun, okay? All right, first question is from Ben Holmes. Ben is a great artist. I've talked about Ben before. Ben is I'm sorry. Okay. I just burped while I was saying a word in the microphone. I apologize. That's disgusting. Anyway, Ben says, what one thing would you change about your studio that would make the biggest difference to you? Not gear or equipment. One thing I would change. One thing. See, you make me say one thing, and now I got to think of one thing. I would probably, if it was one thing, it would be the layout, which is a lot of things, I guess, but it's really one thing. So I don't have it. The way I have to lay things out, my desk is here. There's not really treatment. There's treatment on that back wall. There's not much on the sides. There's just no place for it because there's a door and there's a door. But there really was no better place to put this. This whole kitchen area with a sink is kind of pointless. There's a bathroom in the middle. The back room is cool that I have a back room, but it's not super. A lot of the floor space is taken up by this weird. You may have seen the raised divide. I don't know what it is. It's probably an air conditioner vent underneath. I wouldn't mind to have, ideally, probably gut this whole place, move the bathroom probably to the back of the room, or maybe still have it in the middle, and then have 2 rooms where I can see into the other room, have proper doors, and a little better isolation in there. There's an air conditioner unit, and so some things tend to rumble when I record them back there, especially quieter stuff. So yeah, I'd probably just renovate the place to be a little better fit for what I do. But that said, probably not gonna do that anytime soon because I'm not suffering here. But that would be something I would maybe change, and maybe a proper treatment of this space, more than what I have now. But again, if you listen to the stuff that I'm doing, I'm not releasing Grammy-winning stuff yet. But even the EP that I did just recently with all the mistakes, and I talked about all the mistakes, it still sounds really good, and it was all done in here. So it's not that I can't make good-sounding music, and I feel like, if anything, the improvements that I continue to want to make are improvements to the way I do things, not the room or the gear itself. I'm always improving me, and I know I've talked about that 1,000 times. So good question, Ben. I'd be interested to know in the comments below, maybe not on the chat, but if you're watching this video or listening to this podcast, what would you change about your studio if you had one thing to change? It's interesting. Other question over on Facebook is from Thomas Bjorndal from, I think, Sweden. Norway, I'm sorry. If that's offensive, I apologize. I assume y'all all get along. From Norway says, thanks for the great podcast. I'm a VIP member and a Dueling Mixes member. Whoa, double dip. I love it. He says, I've purchased a PreSonus Eureka. Is it normal to have noise when using phantom power? Dynamic microphones have almost no noise, but condensers are noisy. Thanks. You know, I've got a Eureka, and over the years, it's gotten more noisy. Mine has kind of a buzz regardless of whether I do phantom or not. So I'm not an electrician. I don't know, but I would imagine someone who's into electronics probably would know a few things to try. It could be cleaning out the inside. I don't know if that's a thing. Could be resoldering some points. I really don't know, but I wonder if it's a fairly easy fix. Maybe a new power supply. You can get in touch with PreSonus. They may have some ideas, or a local electronics repair I don't know. I've just not used it. I used it on Kick Drum for this latest, Kick Drum for the latest EP, and it worked fine, but you're not going to hear that buzz on a Kick Drum track. So I don't use it for much of anything else. So I don't know. All right, we'll switch over to the live chat. Any questions we have there? Marco says, I would love to make a live streaming on YouTube concert to present my EP. On the tech side, how can it be done? So I'm guessing, Marco, you're saying you want to stream your EP, as in literally just pull it up on screen and just play it, as opposed to perform it. It's fairly easy to do. The software I use is very inexpensive. It's called, Wirecast Play. If you go into YouTube streaming, it has a link to it. It's a special version made just for YouTube. It's actually hard to find. I think you have to find it through YouTube. I think there's a free version. This one was maybe like $10. And you can see if you're on the stream, it's not amazing quality, but it's fine. And the audio quality is great, especially if you can stream in at least 720 HD. The audio quality is good enough to do something like this. But that's the main piece of software you need. Also, for anyone doing videos like this or streaming, you got to figure out how you're going to get the audio from your computer to get rerouted back into the stream. That's something you're going to have to do on your own, because every system's different. I use a PreSonus mixer, which everything goes through. I also use some software called Audio Hijack Pro, and then also the Soundflower driver. I have to use kind of all of those to make this work. So for example, I'm talking right now, my mic is going into the mixer, and then the mixer is going into the computer. And then the computer, through the Audio Hijack, is telling it to take the main outputs of my mixer and route them to the Soundflower driver. And then the Wirecast Play software that is streaming this video is set to its audio input as the SoundCloud driver. So there you go. As far as playing and singing live, which is what Marco is saying he wants to do, again, it depends on what gear you have. If you have a mixer, just do exactly what I'm telling you right now. Just play and sing instead of talk. Or you can just use a single microphone, or you can get a USB mic, and that'd be really easy to do. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. I know it's not super helpful, but it's really just a matter of figuring out how to get the audio to the streaming thing. Also, maybe don't do it on YouTube and do it on things like Concert Window. They make it a little bit easier. Here's a question from Pidal. And by the way, if you ask your question, just ask it once. If you keep asking it, it actually doesn't help me get to it any quicker. Are you rolling off the low end on all tracks in a mix? No, I don't. Several years ago, I posted that one of the best mixing tips I ever got was to, roll off the low end on everything but kick and bass. And while that can be good advice occasionally, I don't do that by default anymore. I only roll off the low end if it needs it. If it doesn't need it, I don't do it. Occasionally I will, like on electric guitars, I'll just roll off all the low end in case there's some rumble there that I'm not hearing, but it might still be there, or maybe I'm just not listening for it. But in general, no, I don't roll off all the low end on all my tracks. Jim Edgar says, check out Loop by Rogue Amoeba. I've heard they make good stuff. I won't check it out because I've got a system that works, but if someone else wants to, go for it. There's a question from Steve that people are answering. I'm trying to find Steve's question. Oh, well, we'll get back to it. Big Al says, Al's House Production says, how do you manage distractions in the studio? Sorry, Al, there's another guy that I worked with named Big Al. You're different Al. How do you manage distractions in the studio? Give me some more specifics. What do you mean? Like you're working on music and then you end up on YouTube, like that kind of distraction? Or give me a for instance, maybe. Here's a question from Nathan, says, how do you use delay effectively on a vocal? Every time I try to use it on a vocal, I can never get it to work right and sound good. Have you got any tips? Well, I always use it as a send from the original vocal. So send it to a delay bus. But for me, a lot of times, almost all the time, it's an analog style delay, and I'm usually rolling off a fair amount of lows and some highs as well, so it doesn't sound super crisp. It has a little more of a lo-fi sound. That, to me, helps it blend with a nice, bright, clear vocal and add an extra tone to it that can work. Now, if you want to go aggressive, if you listen to my latest EP, the one called Someone to Blame, I used a lot of slapback delay with distortion on it because I just like that sound. It has a clean vocal and then a distorted delay, And those two kind of go together. It'd be pretty cool. All right. Al is writing back to follow up on his question about distractions. He says, it's more like with everything going on around you, from friends needing help with one thing or another, and also the internet with Facebook, YouTube, and stuff of that nature, I tend to be too much of a yes man. I tell you some great advice, and this there's so much good advice that you read in a business book or a self-improvement book applies in the studio. It's not necessarily specific to studio stuff, but if you can get in and I'm bad at this too, but if you can get in a mindset of doing one thing at a time, instead of, multitasking where you have a lot of things going on, if you can single task, it is amazing how that will help you focus. I don't do it all the time, but when I'm feeling especially overwhelmed, I will plan my day or plan a session to do one thing at a time. And then I try to immerse myself in it. So for example, I just took 2 weeks off or a week and a half off. And over that period, I kept remembering things I need to get done, right? Client projects, stuff for Home Studio Corner, stuff for dueling mixes, and a lot of session work. And so I've got this, and whatever you use doesn't matter, but I've got this planner. It's literally a full year planner. Every day is a page, and it's got a place like a calendar from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., a place for to-dos, and then a place for notes at the bottom. Super simple. And my wife actually encouraged me to get it because I tend to jump from one system to the next all the time and never actually just, anyway, so she said, get this and you can't change it for the whole year. I was like, that's a great idea. So anyway, but what I did is I got this out and I looked at my next available day. I looked at my list of things I made of things I need to do, and I said, what's the most important? And then I pick that one and put it on the next available day. And I blocked off whatever time I need. So for example, this morning I had to record a bunch of acoustic guitar parts for a session that I was involved with earlier this month. And through a sad chain of events, we recorded some songs and then the files got corrupted or lost. And so we had to re-record them. And so that was the very first thing I had to do. I was on vacation. I couldn't make it to the retracking session that they had because I was on vacation. So I set it up as today was my day to do that. So literally I came down here, and when it was time to work, I set up mics. I got all the charts and everything set up. I went in that room with a laptop that I could control the computer in here from, and I sat and I recorded for 3 hours straight. And I have like my elbows sore because I recorded so much. But I had 8 songs to do. I did 7 before lunch, and I got to do 1 after sometime this afternoon. But I was in the zone. My phone was off or on Do Not Disturb, and I took a couple breaks in there, but mostly I was just head down getting it done. And a part of what helps me do that is because you can just say, okay, I planned my day, but then I just blew it off, and that's going to happen all the time. But for me, knowing that, I had to do this podcast at 1 o'clock, and I got to get all that set up. And then I've got to go sign my tax return after this, and then I got to come back in here and finish that final song. And then tomorrow there's a whole nother, I don't know what it is. Tomorrow I've got a whole day planned, and then the next day through like most of the way through April, every day's got something assigned to it or multiple things assigned to it. And there's a few blocks for me to play catch up if I get behind, but that keeps me motivated because I know if I blow off today, I've got to work tonight instead of hang out with my wife, or I've got to push everything back, and that's going to be super annoying. So for me, setting aside enough time to do the task and then just doing that and making myself do that. And then I'll reward myself. If I take a break, I'll pull up YouTube and watch something for 10 minutes as a little reward. Then I'll go back to work. So I don't know if that answers your question, Al, but that's kind of a very current example of somehow a way that I'm trying not to become such a slave to distractions. Gary says, as I learn more, I'm finding recently I EQ first for bad frequencies and polishing. Then I put a second EQ for mid-side work, example, pushing the low end to just the mid. Any pitfalls I'm missing? I don't see any pitfalls. I don't do mid-side EQ. I've never seen a need for it. Granted, I've never used it. I understand what it is. I don't see it as being something that's really necessary. So I would probably just say 1 EQ. I will use 2 EQs in the sense of I'll EQ it, then I'll compress it, and if the compression does some things to the sound that I want to change, I'll put an EQ after the compressor, so I'm EQing the compressed signal. But otherwise, I'm not dogging on you for using mid-side EQ. I just don't use it. And if I don't use it and I'm not unhappy with what I'm doing, I don't tend to think I need it. So that doesn't necessarily apply to you, but that's where I'm at. For recording, this is from P. Delano. For recording guitar, if all you have is a small solid state amp, would you use it or just use virtual amps? It depends. I would use what sounds best for the guitar part that you need. I would imagine the small solid state amp will not give you all the tones that you need, so virtual amps might be the right option. For me, it's not so much about here's an example. So I've got the Avid 11 rack, and I used it on my album Better This Way. Almost exclusively all the electric guitars were that. I had just gotten it. I was super excited about it. And actually, I think all the guitars on the EP Free were through that. I've since gotten the Fender Deluxe Reverb, the silver face one, the custom, was it the 68 custom? Not a reissue, but anyway, and I've been using that for all my guitars, and occasionally another amp, and occasionally the 11 rack. But for me, that cleaner amp with a lot of different types of distortion in front of it gives me a lot of different tones. So if you can get a nice clean amp, and then for $100 get a different distortion pedal, or a different delay pedal or reverb pedal, you can change dramatically the tone that you're getting with just a few fairly inexpensive pedals versus buying a bunch of expensive amps. My guess is you probably need one good amp or one good thing like an 11 rack used. Get an 11 rack for $300 used on eBay, and you'll have all the amp tones that you need, and it's fantastic. It really does sound great. I did do a session recently with a guy who's a phenomenal guitar player who used the Kemper profiling amp. And his stuff, a lot of the stuff he did sounded amazing. It had stereo effects on it. Super cool. There were some things he played where I just didn't like the tone, and that's just a personal preference. I didn't like that tone. It wasn't because the Kemper's awful. It's just the way he heard it and wanted the tone to sound was different from the way I would have heard it and I would have wanted to play. And that's just personal preference. So those are my thoughts on that. Todd says, wait, never mind. He was answering somebody else's question. A good headphone for mixing in a home studio. Really, as long as it's a decent headphone, so I'd say, $100 or more maybe, you can get good mixes on it. If you can't get good mixes, it's you, not the headphones. That said, I do love like the Sennheiser HD650. I've seen them priced as low as like $200 or $300, as high as $500 or $600. They're really nice. I know mastering engineers that use them, which is kind of what gives them credibility to me. But that's expensive. Granted, it's not as expensive as a really nice set of speakers. So if you're thinking about getting the same quality as nice speakers for $500 in headphones, it starts to make a little more sense. But they're good. But you can get good mixes on a pair of Sennheiser HD280s, which is what I use for tracking, or even those Sony MDR 7506s, which I hate, but you can get good mixes on them. It's all about learning to get a good mix on the system that you're using. And obviously nicer equipment can help that happen maybe easier, but it's not going to make you a better mixer either way. Steve Rossbotham uses Sennheiser HD600s, and he also uses that Sonar Works headphone plugin that apparently is really great. I hear a lot of people saying that. Giuliano's here. Welcome. Glad to see you here. Let me scroll up and get some of the questions I missed. Do you know of any good, this is from Brian, do you know any good mobile recording solutions, like a multi-track recorder that could export all WAV files so it can be imported into Pro Tools at home? Any thoughts? For me, I don't think of those multi-track. I mean, I'd have to know the situation, but I wonder if just getting a simple 4 or 8 channel interface and a laptop wouldn't be the best solution, right? Even with a hard drive or whatever. If it's just the fact that you don't want to take, or either don't have a laptop, don't want to buy a laptop, which I get that, and you just want a standalone piece, there are those out there. I know some people are saying Zoom makes some. They're just not as common because so many people own laptops or even iPads, and you can connect iPads to multi-track record there. It's just, there are so many options. It starts to become less and less practical to have a standalone box that records it when you can, with just a few extra cables, connect it to a laptop and get essentially the full capabilities of what you have in your studio on the road. So that's what I would do. I know it's not probably answering your question, but I can really only answer what I would do in those situations. So that's what I would do. Laura Wallace says, does producing and mixing ever get to be a huge drag when you don't like your client's music? Have you ever turned down a client because you weren't excited about the music? Yes, it is a drag when you hate the music. I think early on, especially if you were just wanting paid work, I mentioned this last night. We had a coaching call for Dueling Mixes members, and I mentioned the same thing. If you are learning how to do this and you're kind of in the beginning phases, maybe if you're not booked solid for months with really great clients, then I would say take on whatever offers you get, because even if you hate the music, you'll learn something. You always learn something. You may learn how to fix a problem because their guitars were recorded so poorly. You learn a new way to fix that or to make them sound better, or you get better at fixing some timing issues, and all those things. Even though we want to get it right at the source, we want good tracks and all that, it's also good to know how to fix stuff when it's broken, because sometimes you get things that are broken and there's no other option than to try to fix them. So I think, if nothing else, it can teach you, remind you how important good tracks and good songs are. I think that's helpful. But it's okay to turn down work. If you hate the music, obviously I would love to only work on stuff that I love, but I still work on music that occasionally I get and I think, it's not my cup of tea, or, it's not, I don't like the lyric, I don't like whatever. And it just happens, but it's okay to turn it down. I just tend to think, unless you are just rolling in opportunity, I have people I know who are really well known, engineers, producers that will still work on, one-off projects for clients whose music is pretty bad. And they just, he'll record bass on something for somebody because they asked him to, knowing that it's never going to amount to much because the music's really bad. But, he had a free night and somebody wanted to hire him, so he did it. So I always think it can't hurt to take on the work unless it's taking you away from really good projects. And in that case, maybe it starts to make sense to back out. But yeah, you're occasionally going to work on stuff you don't like, I think. I think that's just kind of a given. Steve says, do you ever gain stage your group tracks or just individual tracks? I just don't do the whole gain staging thing. I turn it up. If the faders are at 0 and a track is too loud, I turn the track down. If it's too quiet, I turn the actual audio up. I'm not trying to get a certain level. I'm not measuring it. I think that stuff's boring and doesn't actually yield any good results. So no, I don't do gain staging. I just set levels. If something's clipping, I bring it down. If it's too quiet, I bring it up, and that's it. And that's really what I do. With the caveat being, I try to keep the faders at 0 as much as I can early on and do some of that from the beginning, so then I have plenty of room to move the faders up and down without losing resolution. Because if it's too loud and you bring the fader way down, then if you do a little movement on the fader, you lose a lot of resolution. That's why I try to get it at 0. It's not for any other reason than that. And I'm out of time. I've got to hit the road here in just a second, so thanks for listening.